page. Give me a sec. All right, let me do this. Jesus. Okay. Give me a sec. Good. Okay. All right, let's get the chat going. No, I don't want to upgrade. Okay, let's share my screen. So we're opening up with the difficult stuff. We're talking about temporal effects of manual therapy, and by that we mean how long do the effects last, and is this connected to how long the neurophysiological effects of manual therapy last? So I think I'll grab the screen share, and then maybe you can explain what neurophysiological effects are functional.
Sure. I mean, I guess there's like the main one, or I guess there's two main ones, right? You have the increase in the sympathetic nervous system, right? Which would be, and you measure that by like skin conductance. And I think there's another measure. Which one was that? That was in your systematic review. It was skin conductance and what else? Alexis?
Skin temperature. There's also salivary secretions. It's
Yeah.
usually like the ones they pick is usually an indication of parasympathetic activation. It's one of the theories behind manual therapy is that it brings you back to the more relaxed state. So like parasympathetic, which is the ones you're using when you're relaxing and digesting. And that's what we do with our hands. And another common one is using pain pressure threshold as a measure of like how sensitive you are or how active central sensitization is going at the very moment.
And then there's some theories about that where like mobilization or manipulation would activate regions in the periaqueductal gray, which is like an endogenous pain modulatory system. And like you said, reducing those pain pressure thresholds.
Yep.
I think those are the two main ones, right? At least neurophysiologic. I haven't read about any others or any like significant others.
Well, I mean, if we're talking specifically effects, they're technically pain is considered a neurophysiological effect because
Okay.
it's to make a distinction with like biomechanical effect. Where like before we used to think that manual therapy was like moving joints and that's why you felt better.
Yeah.
You have to do it in the right direction, and we see that's not really relevant. There's a meta-analysis on this, I think, from 2019 or 2015 by NIM on like the location of the manipulation or mobilization, and it doesn't seem to matter where you apply it as long as human touch and a therapeutic intervention is provided.
Yeah.
Like if you compare a randomly selected mobilization to general, like very specific therapist selected mobilization. So yeah, it's more like a widespread effect, and I think we could say the same thing about exercise. We notice it's less mechanical, at least for pain, the mechanisms. What else? Oh, you forgot to mention there's one big theory, which is probably one of the first theories about neurophysiological effects of like how exercise can produce pain relief. It's the pain gate theory. I think it was started about with acupuncture, and it was like that creating a little bit of pain can activate pain relieving systems that we have in our body. So what you would call endogenic opioid producers or something like that, or endogenic.
I think I said endogenous. I think I said endogenous pain modulation.
Well,
I think there's just different ways you can. Yeah. But that's another
probably.
one. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we have different. So we have three different ones. We have increase in parasympathetic nervous system. We have this endogenous pain modulation through exercise, and then we have another type of endogenous pain modulation through these mobilizations and manipulations.
Yeah.
Right.
So let me just plug in the paper. Yeah, so we're here. All right. So it was this paper by Eric Egidus, good researcher, about the neurologic effects of a single session of spinal joint mobilization. So do the effect last? So right away from the title, you can see one of the what people would call limitation. So it's not how we do it in clinical practice, right? Usually we do a lot of sessions of manual therapy in a row to achieve like a good clinical outcome. This is just for one. I think it's necessary just to have like a theoretical what we call it, to be able to draw conclusions, because if you do a lot, you're not going to be able to isolate the effect as well. So it's like taking one pill and seeing how it works in the short term, because you're looking at mechanisms specifically. So what the paper did is they looked at all the neurophysiological variables that we mentioned before, and they looked how long it lasted. So they had repeat follow-ups. One limitation, it was only, well, again, you could say it's a limitation because it's less applicable, but it's more rigorous in terms of like conclusions that you can draw from it, because it's very specific. So they only look at like spinal mobilizations and manipulations. There was 10 papers. I think there was only one at the lumbar spine, and then 3 at the cervical spine. I'm sorry, there was 1 at the elbow too. So and basically what they saw was that overall, if we look at the table, oh, and by the way, that was a systematic review from 2011, and it followed the Prisma guidelines. So it's a good, well conducted systematic review. So yeah, what they saw is if you look at the tables overall, there's a lot of like small effects, but after like 5 to 10 minutes, these effects are all gone, which is in contrast to the one exception, which is pain. So the Vincenzino paper is the only one of the only 2 papers that looked at pain. So it wasn't like asymptomatic subjects. The other was, yeah. So the other was I can't say his name, but it's like Kalayanta Fotforn. Interesting name.
Good attempt.
Yeah. So it was a cervical mobilization, and they lasted about 5 or 10 minutes. And then the one by Vincenzino, the effect on elbow pain, the worst elbow pain felt last 24 hours. Yeah, so it's in contrast again, because all these neurophysiological effects, which is again is a buzzword of how it works. It's like, oh no, it's not a mechanical effects, it's neurophysiological effects. Well, interesting, because again, that pain relief lasts way longer, right? If you could 10 minutes or 5 minutes or even sometimes like 30 seconds to 24 hours, it's a huge difference. Why do people experience that longer lasting pain relief in the long term? One of the big limitations from that paper, and again, I don't think it's the fault of the paper because this is a systematic review, is that there wasn't a lot of papers on symptomatic people, right? It's rare that you use manual therapy in asymptomatic people. We do sometimes, and I think that's one thing at the gym that I find interesting. A lot of things like I would consider manual therapy, like foam rolling or a massage gun, are being used, and it's like, does the range of motion gains that you're experiencing, like, do they last long enough for it to be justified spending like 5 or 10 minutes on it? I think you had a paper on it, because again, that paper, the systematic review I just quoted, was from 2011. I think I asked you to look for papers that were more recent.
Yeah, I mean, you just pointed out, yeah, this stuff mainly looked at neurophysiological effects and pain, and a little bit at range of motion. So there's a more recent paper by Chesterton that
Yeah.
kind of looked at mobilizations and manipulations on the lumbar spine and how
Yeah.
that influenced hamstring range of motion. And basically, what they found was that it lasts about 20 minutes from when they start it to when they finish. After 20 minutes, there's like very trivial effects that like don't really seem to matter too much. And then there was also another paper by Ganesh in 2015, which observed the complete opposite and saw that mobilization in the lumbar spine like increased range of motion in the hamstrings for 24 hours. So it's like we don't really know, but the methods in the Chesterton paper were a bit better. So I'm like leaning towards Chesterton here
Yeah,
as an explanation, since the other paper that saw a 24-hour increase in hamstring range of motion after a mob, it was kind of confounded because they didn't really control for people's activity levels.
I would side on that end too, because the Edgetus systematic review, 6 out of the 10 papers were high quality and 4 were moderate quality. So it's kind of like a decently populated systematic review. It's not like a garbage in, garbage out paper. So if it aligns with the Chesterton paper, I would be leaning it to go that direction as well. I'm just curious, were they both in symptomatic people or asymptomatic people?
Both in asymptomatic, and they pointed that out in the discussion too. It's just, yeah, they need more research in symptomatic people
Yeah.
to make a firm conclusion.
Yeah. But it's interesting that, again, we'll try to do a deep dive in the future. That it's interesting that there's such a strong opinion on like manual therapy's effects being neurophysiological, if neurophysiological, despite not there being conclusive proof of the link with pain. Like it could just be an epiphenomenon, right?
Yeah,
Like I could give an example. If I hold your hand, it might provide pain relief just because psychologically it feels good, right? But your hand's also going to get warmer because we're exchanging heat. Is there a link between the heat, which you could consider a neurophysiological effect, and the pain relief? We don't really know. So I think the strong take on manual therapy right now should be that manual therapy, not necessarily that it's neurophysiological, but that it's not mechanical. Again, you could say, you could weasel your way out and say that pain is technically a neurophysiological effect, but I don't think that's the way a lot of people, including me, would understand it before reading that
yeah.
paper.
I think the only counter argument there is that, yeah, I think it's mainly neurophysiological, but the time course of
Yeah,
the increase in range of motion, it's different than the time course that the neurophysiological effects last. So the neurophysiological effects, like you said, last like 5 to 10 minutes, but the range of motion effects will last 20 minutes. And then for some people, it lasts even longer because, like, in the
yeah,
what Chesterton did, which I actually like and which more papers should do, is they looked at individual responses to
hmm,
the intervention. They didn't just look at the group mean as a whole. And there's like
yeah,
tons of different, very, very wide range of individual responses to the mobilization. So, there are some people, like, at like 40, 45 minutes still reporting uh, a small effect, but it's there. So it's like, you know, even though the neurophysiological effects have like faded away, there's still this range of motion effect happening at later time points. So I don't know what can explain that. It could be
yeah.
mechanical, but it could be something else.
There's two things I could say about that. First of all, maybe it's that it's kind of like a vaccine. The inflammatory portion, like the reaction to the vaccine, lasts about a week in
Yeah.
most cases, and then you get an effect that can last very long. So maybe the neurophysiological combo is like a cocktail that provokes the pain relief that can then last longer. Maybe it's just psychological, honestly, and there's like no connection between the two. Um, there's also the fact that I forgot what I was going to say, but yeah, we definitely need more papers on like how long manual therapy lasts. I think we're going to have to look differently, like not a systematic review per se, but look at different papers and see like papers with a lot of follow-ups and see how long the effects last. Because I don't think there's a lot right now. But again, we have to look more precisely.
Agreed. Oh, yeah, especially in the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do think that there's like, this is most of the literature looking at this specifically, and none of the papers reported anything lasting more than 24 hours, including pain and range of motion. So I think that's a fair take, and it's a prudent one to say that manual therapy doesn't seem to last more than a day, according to the current data.
But that doesn't mean it's like useless though.
No,
What do you think, like, there were some like points in the discussions of the papers I was reading. Do you think it can provide a nice window of opportunity for a
yeah, if
patient?
someone's in pain and it's like I can't get out of bed, now they can get out of bed. We know that movement helps. So if you're doing that, that's great.
Yeah.
And sometimes short pain relief helps. Like when I have sex, I'm not like in trouble for days, but it feels good. And I do spend nights sometimes. Like, who's never been to a bar looking to get laid? You know what I mean? So, yeah, there is some. It's just, again, as long as the person's aware that it's not like something that, first of all, they need to do, and that it doesn't last forever, I'm fine with it, right? It's just about
Yeah.
being honest about the mechanisms.
Yeah.
I think there
Good.
was like
Yeah.
one really interesting. Yeah.
I was
Go
just
ahead,
I
keep
was just
going.
making sure that no, I was just making sure that we're not, people understand that we're not saying that manual therapy is useless.
No, I,
Um,
I use it honestly.
yeah.
It's just like most, and I think even the effects of exercise, we tend to say like exercise lasts longer. That might, but I'd say the main portion that patients feel, because the long creeping effect that it might have on like sensitization and like low tolerance take long to build. So the
Mhm.
most of the effects people will feel like when they're like, "Hey, I exercise, I feel better." Like that short term pain relief is the same for exercise. It's probably mostly neurophysiological and short term. It's just the difference. The way I see it is that you have like a short term strategy that you can do yourself at home for free.
Mhm.
So you can keep going with the effects of manual therapy at home. It's just you give it to yourself basically by moving. So yeah.
Do
Yeah,
we
give me
want
a
to
second.
pull up the Villers paper, or do we just move on?
Sure, go ahead. I'm looking for the limitations that was really interesting that they mentioned in the paper.
There you go. It's right there.
Okay, I see the conclusion because I thought it was interesting. However, now that the paradigm has shifted, continued research on small samples of healthy subjects with irrelevant immediate outcomes like salivary rate, skin conductance, and skin temperature should give way to randomized controlled trials on subjects with pain and these functions so that the product is an enhanced, more robust paradigm that leads to clinical guidelines that would benefit our patients. Yeah, because again, we don't really know, once we know how manual therapy works a little bit better, and again, it seems to be mostly contextual factors, which we're not going to go into too much because it's like a can of worms. We're going to be able to make them more potentiate them, basically make them more
Mhm.
effective. The same way you can extract like a vitamin for something for people that really need it, basically. Um, I do wanted to mention something. I think you mentioned something about looking at individual responses. That's kind of
Yeah.
doing like a responder analysis, and that's really frowned upon in the literature. Like people who do methodology like to laugh at that because it's
Mhm.
basically taking a randomized control trial and then making it not randomized.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I just thought
it's
it
kind
was
of
cool
stupid,
to
right?
see though.
Yeah,
I just thought it was cool to see like
yeah.
all the differences in responses.
It is
I don't
interesting,
they
but
didn't
again, unless there's a
they
trend.
didn't yeah, but they didn't like, they didn't do anything with that. They were just like
Okay,
they were
okay,
just showcasing that yeah, they weren't making any conclusions off of it.
yeah. Because sometimes people do that, and they're like, "Oh, well, some people got much better." Well, that's
Yeah,
how a
no.
bell curve
Yeah.
works, you know. Like some
Yeah,
people
they
get
definitely
better,
weren't
whatever
doing
we
that.
do. So okay, good. All right.
Definitely
So do
not.
you want me to screen share something else? Oh no, you wanted to
Yeah,
do
do
the
you
which one
screen
is it?
share
The time course? What's it called?
the
Time
Villers.
course.
I put in the chat so they're screen
Villers.
share.
Okay, sure. I'll share that one. Okay,
Let's do that quick.
share. There we go.
All right, cool. So I
Immediate
guess
effects of adding lumbar mobilization as a static stretching program on hamstrings range of motion. An exploratory study from
yeah,
2022 this year, actually, by
yeah.
James Villers.
So this is like so the first thing I'm going to point out is this is exploratory, obviously, and you can't make definite conclusions off this paper for sure, especially because
Small
they didn't
sample.
like yeah, small sample, but they also didn't do like a sample size calculation like an a priori one. Um,
Okay.
so yeah, that's a problem, but it's exploratory, so whatever. Um, so basically what they looked at is they looked at three different groups. They had like 30 people, all healthy individuals again, nobody in pain. And they had one group do static stretching for the hamstrings. One group did like a lumbar spinal manipulation therapy. And I think that was at L4. And then they had a last group do a combination of the two. So the last group did the combination. They did the lumbar spine manipulation first, and then they did the static stretching. And they wanted to see which group had the biggest effect in terms of range of motion increase in the hamstrings. And what they found is that all three had pretty much the same effect. There was no there was really no group by time interaction effect with any of these approaches, which is kind of that's kind of interesting because you could argue that the static stretching and the mobilization operate off of independent mechanisms, right? So you'd think there would be kind of like an additive effect, versus if you use two things with the same mechanism, you get like a ceiling effect. So I guess that was pretty interesting to me, and kind of showcases, at least in the short term, that maybe these manipulations might not help too much with range of motion compared to just doing stretching. But I mean, you could just use it on its own and get the same outcome. I guess there's a lot of different approaches here, is what I'm trying to say, and they all work pretty equally.
Okay. I'm not surprised, to be honest. I feel like everyone has like that window. It's like when you're working on someone whose ankle is sprained and then you do manual therapy, it's always like almost always the same range gain.
Yeah.
Unless they're very acute. So it's like there's always like no one's gonna win like 15 degrees like in a session with the ankle, unless again if they haven't put weight on it at all. It's usually like, I don't know, like 5 degrees.
Yeah. But it's kind of
So I'm
it's
not
kind of funny
surprised there's
though.
a ceiling.
But it is still kind of funny though, because like PTs will do, manipulations and they'll do stretching.
Yeah,
Right.
it's
Versus
very common. Again, I don't think it's useful either.
Yeah. Versus just picking one, But anyway, that's kind of the main thing I just wanted to, like, as a take home, like, these things all work equally well. And I guess I was just still kind of puzzled by the ceiling effect a little bit. I guess you explained it a little bit better, but yeah, I mean, these two things do have different mechanisms though, and I was kind of a little puzzled.
So if we can like conclude what we're saying, like sum it up, basically there's strong conclusions that could be made about manual therapy. The very strong is that it's not almost never a mechanical effect. We also know that it's very probably short acting according to the papers that we have. But again, we need more papers in symptomatic people that look at several follow-ups to see how long it lasts and compares to like a placebo manip. And again, maybe we'll do a deep dive in that later. The other would be that it's non-specific, because again, there's meta-analysis on this by NIM from, again, 2015, 2019. I don't remember, in this paper that you just cited, which again, is just exploratory, but it fits with the wider body of research. So those are strong takes. But the one thing that this systematic review adds for nuance is that we don't know if the neurophysiological effects beyond pain relief or range of motion increases or are connected to like the commonly used explanations, which is like a parasympathetic activation, because its markers, which are like salivary secretions, skin conductance, skin temperature, all that stuff, is very, very short lasting compared to the pain relief, which again, albeit temporary, can be as long as a day, whereas that stuff lasts like at most like 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah.
All right, so more research needed, basically. Okay,
yeah.
My brain's fried, so let's look at something stupid. You want to look at that ear massage I told you about?
Sounds good. Let's do it.
Yeah, I found that on a Quebec page that was completely unrelated. It was just too good. It's from a page called like something like Massage ASMR or whatever. Give me a sec. Is it this one? No. Yeah, this one. Fuck. Okay, give me a sec. Okay, you'll hear the sound that it makes. It's fucking hilarious. Look at his eyes. Oh my god.
What the hell?
That's what good pussy sounds like. Alright, enough. Let me pause it.
All right.
Enough?
Yeah, enough.
Then imagine you pulled up to like the physio visit, you have low back pain, and the guy he's like, all right, I'll be right with you, and then he does that. Like what do you do?
Report him.
Yeah, probably me too. I guess I'd just leave. I'm like, hey, cool. Yeah, but that was intense. I think it's
What was that for?
uh, I don't know. He's like I think it's either it's the same guy or there's two crazy guys.
Yeah.
What's his name? Something Barber. Like I don't know what he does, but basically he does all these crazy stuff. He's like very theatrical,
Mm-hmm.
and like he pulls hair too. I think. I don't know. I just find it really interesting that someone would see this and be like, "Oh yeah, I need this." Like I wish we
Yeah.
could see the post in context to see what people are saying. It's just
Oh,
I don't
absolutely.
know. It just makes me feel weird being like the skeptical guy when this guy probably makes way more money than I do.
You think he actually makes money? Like,
I mean,
I
it
can't,
seems like he's working in India, so probably not. But
I
I mean,
can't believe
relative to
that.
the center of life there,
Yeah,
probably. Like if you were here, I'm pretty sure you'd have like a fancy sports car, which I don't. I drive a Volvo. I
nah,
like it
bro.
though.
I don't know, man. People aren't that stupid. Come on.
I mean, Human Garage has 1 million followers,
Yeah.
and they were the biggest medical clinic in like America for a bit. Remember that?
Yeah. I guess
Not the most recognized, but they had like the biggest sales pitch because they would do these. What was it like $200? What was it, $400 a session with like 3 therapists or something at the same time?
I don't know. I don't know.
And there was this. You remember that lady that what is it like the fascia blaster or whatever? Not the
Yeah.
fascia blaster, but the fascia whatever muscle whisperer. She
Yeah.
charges like $700 for 2 hours.
To
It's
beat
like you
her
do one
patients
patient
up.
a day, and like she posted and people come. Like at least that guy didn't seem like he was hurting the other guy.
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah, I do think. Um, I don't know. I don't think people are stupid. They can be, but I think it's just they don't know.
I don't know. It's just like when someone's like fingering your ear, it's like come on, you know that something's wrong. Like you can't. I'm sorry.
I mean, if you think about every
It's gotta
idea
be a
from
little bit, it's gotta.
if you think about every idea from like an outsider's perspective without the cultural context, it seems weird. Like even if you think about it, like acupuncture seems to help a little bit with pain, but like that's documented. But it's like if you think about it, it's really weird. It's like, hey, I'm gonna stab you with
Yeah.
needles, and you're gonna feel better.
Yeah,
Like
dude.
that's a weird idea as well. You know what I mean? And it like they managed to convince so many people to do that, and it's like it came in the West. So I don't know.
Fair enough.
I guess
Fair
with
enough.
culture, everything's weird. He clearly is from not from the same culture as us. After that, do you want a good take or do you want a controversial one?
Let's do controversial.
Okay, let's do.
Yeah.
So this is an Angus Bradley take, which he said a couple times before. There we go. Share. Okay, can you see this?
Yeah.
Yeah. If I haven't
Yeah.
learned anything from the evidence-based era of fitness, is that 99% of trainers have no business reading research. They need secondary scientific sources like textbooks, where the information has been distilled for them. The data doesn't speak for itself, and that's how do you say that word?
Abundantly.
Abundantly clear when you see
Yeah.
some of the evidence trainers share to support their views. Stop asking for PubMed IDs. Start asking for textbook recommendations, and your training knowledge will skyrocket. I mean, what do you think about this?
You know what? For most people, for most trainers, I'm honestly like pretty much in agreement here. I think there's some benefit, from learning to read research, but
Mhm.
it's honestly not worth the time commitment for most. You are, if you can find a good trustworthy source, you are better off. Yeah, I am in agreement here. You're better off just going
Yep.
to that source for information, especially because like the more specialized you get in your the more specialized you get with your PhD and everything like that, the more you realize that a surface level interpretation of the research is not going to do it, and you're better off like going to a textbook where a PhD has like specialized in the area for a long period of time, writes recommendations for you and interprets the literature for you. I do think you need an extensive background to interpret some of this research. And I'm not saying I have that background either, because I don't. So,
I mean,
yeah.
you're doing pretty well, but yeah, I kind of tend to agree. I don't know how I'd feel about physios though, because he's talking about trainers, but I think we can extend that to physios. I always cite that study, the Zadro 2019 systematic review, and it's like around 50% of physios don't even follow basic clinical practice guidelines in MSK. So I'd say just reading the basics would be a good start. As far as like reading raw research, because again, a clinical practice guidelines is not raw research. It's like they did the work for you, and you can look at the
Yeah.
reference list if you want. I'd say for most physios, given that into like putting that into context, just following a secondary source would also be a huge step up in the field and move on tremendously. So there's, I don't know, for fitness,
Sure.
I'd say the mass is my recommendation. For the rest, I'd say following Craig Lehman or like Physio Network also be a huge step up. Because again, I don't know, the order asks you to do course, but they don't really vet, like the professional associations, they don't really vet the quality that much,
Yeah.
which is
I
unfortunate.
honestly, I think for both like trainers and physios, I think it just comes down to like research interpretation skills.
Yeah.
For most of these things, like if you go in like looking for something and to confirm your bias, you're gonna find the paper you want.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so I I just agree. Yeah, you just need a really good base of research interpretation skills to understand, um, how to put everything into context and make good recommendations.
I do think that long term physios, at least physios, I don't know about trainers, but physios need to learn how to read research. It's an incremental skill, right?
Yeah, I
Like you
think
go into research.
there's good like introductions to that. I think Stephen Camper did a series in JOSPT where he just kind of goes through like how to do some like interpret like sample sizes and things like that. It's an entire series. Like, so if you're looking for something, if you're a trainer or a physio, that's probably a good place to start, to understand how to interpret some of these things.
Yeah, Eric Maida has a whole course for free too, like as
Yeah.
well, like
Yeah.
intro to research for clinicians. So he's also a good source. Listening to podcast, his podcast is a good one. What's the podcast called again? I listen to it. It's like I listen to it all the time. I have a blank. PTD Inquest.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Anything to add to this?
No, I don't think that was really a controversial take.
Well, a lot of people would think that. We think that it's controversial
I
because
know
we're always
that
banging
just
on about
wasn't
research, and we're
that
always
wasn't
asking for PubMed IDs.
that's true. It's just, I don't know. That wasn't very controversial. Like, yeah.
Yeah, it's true. Okay. What was it? It was a big week for me, so I didn't have time. Let's look
Oh, do
at
you want to do Caleb's
Caleb.
one?
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
that's a positive one. And then I guess we can end with Seedman, because I actually do want to talk about that now.
Sure.
I'm
You want to
feeling in
send
the
it to
mood
me
for,
Instagram.
yeah.
Okay.
Caving in because it has been shown to be associated with knee injuries such as ACL tears. However, it may surprise you to learn that not all knee valgus is the same. Most of the available research that we have on knee valgus related injuries have to do with ACL tears that occurred during high velocity deceleration, cutting, or pivoting movements during sport. The injury usually occurs on one leg when the knee is bent somewhere between 20 and 30 degrees, and again, the speeds are very high. Now, this is a lot different than what happens during a squat. We typically see knee valgus occur during a squat when the person is accelerating out of the bottom position in a two-leg, slow velocity movement. And this usually occurs when the knee is flexed or bent more than 30 degrees, where the amount of ACL loading is actually less. So if the amount of knee valgus is not too excessive and only occurs momentarily, it's probably not that big of an issue. However, as sometimes happens in beginner lifters, we might see this valgus being excessive throughout the whole motion, and in that case, we might want to correct it. So if you're someone who's been stressed out about your knees moving in a little bit when you squat, you probably don't need to worry about it too much. Is squatting like this?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Love this. Movement optimism.
Yeah,
Love
there
to
we
see
go.
it. Love to see it. Yeah. I think the only thing that I might disagree with is I guess the association with knee injuries and like cutting sports. You know, I think it is a little more complex than that. Wasn't there was a recent what was it?
Yeah, I know that
Systematic review
research top of my head.
from Cronstrom.
So Franco
right?
Romero from 2020, no link between dynamic knee valgum and injuries, be it meniscal tears or ACL, when it's evaluated prospectively first. So if you look at people before they get injured, there's no link.
Yeah.
So it could be that people with knee pain are going to have their knees coming in more because it's a way to recruit other muscles that are less sensitized, right? Kind of like an ankle limp for the knee.
Sure.
So yeah, the link that you see if you look at a mix of research, including people before and after they have pain, so prospective and retrospective studies will show a link, but if you look at only people before they have pain, you don't see that link. There's the same thing exclusively for ACLs, where we see no link, and that was Cronstrom and al. From, I think, 2020 as well, another meta-analysis.
Yeah.
There's even a school of thought which would say that the valgum associated with the knee injuries, like ACL tears, is not a cause, but it's not a consequence, but it's a cause.
Yeah.
Of the injury.
That was
so if you look at the bruising, Zhang and all
Yeah.
from 2019, I think.
There you go.
Right, another meta-analysis. They looked at bruising. Yeah, it was about 500 to 600 people. If you look at the bruising pattern, if valgum was the thing that broke the knee, because like the knee kind of knocks in the femur and the tibia, they kind of articulate together. I don't know if you see my hands, but like what we see is that this is what happens. So the front knee goes in the front. So the bruising pattern is located where the knees, the front. It shows that it's basically the tibia shifting forward too much. That's the main mechanism of injury. There's no significant bruising on the outside or the inside, suggesting it didn't go outside or inside until after the major hit was done. So it goes front, tibia shifts forward, and then the knee goes into valgum. So it goes on the inside. Seems to be the case for most injuries, at least those that have a bone bruise, so a contusion.
Mm-hmm.
Could be, again, there's some, if you look at mechanistic papers where we kind of recreate a knee in a rig, there does seem to be possibly a link with valgum. It's extremely, extremely short-lived. It's something like a few milliseconds. So probably very, very hard to control. So a better target is what I usually say is like maybe valgum matters a little bit, but it's just not a good target. Because first of all, you might need it to juke someone to go into valgum.
Yeah.
And second of all, it's such a short time period that adjusting that reaction all the time, even when you're tired, even when you're playing 90 minutes, you have to do a contact injury with someone. You have to do it every step. That's just probably a bad target, which is one of my gripes with Goda. It's like, we can address strength. You're going to be strong in every situation, but your range of your quality of movement has to change based on the situation, and it's very contextual. So
you're saying that putting a band around your knees is not going to stop knee valgus when you're playing?
Isn't there even a research that it doesn't even help for squats? Like it might make it worse to put
for squats it like, but what about like more athletic movements?
Yeah, I don't think it helps for that. It could be helpful for ACL prevention, but I think it's just because you're getting stronger and getting accustomed to different movements.
Yeah, I think that's
like the landing rear sole portion of strength training. And those programs, interestingly enough, the programs that try to modify knee valgum, they help, but it doesn't seem to be because the valgus is changing.
Yeah,
it's probably again, but more about gradually exposing you to something that might be hurtful.
Sure.
Yeah, it's a practice basically.
So would there ever be a time where you're working with an athlete, would you cue them out of valgus? anytime.
Yeah, for sure. When I work with people who've had ACL injuries, I
Yeah.
cue them to kind of try to keep it neutral. Because to me, it's not necessarily that the valgum is bad. And that's the way I explain it. It's more about control. Right.
Yeah.
So when I love Bulgarian split squat on myself, and when I do it, my knee on my last set of my top set, my knee starts to shake. And I know it's just because it's a load I'm not familiar with, or it's like I'm not mastering it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I want you to master that load. I want you to master your body weight, master that landing. So if you're able to do it without shaking, you have control, right? But I'm not freaking out like, oh, you're going to bust your knee if you go into valgum. Although with a fresh ACL, that might be the case. I don't know.
What about someone who's never had an ACL tear? Would you ever cue him out of valgus?
If it's for ACL prevention, yeah. Otherwise, if they're not like a running athlete, a cutting athlete, I probably wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah.
If they're a powerlifter, probably not. Unless again, it's like showing only when they're with high loads. Like if for a pain perspective, no. From a performance perspective, I'd say it's case dependent. Yeah, would you?
I agree. I agree with the case dependent part for performance. There are some, so like when you work with like really like brand new people who've like never strength trained before, some of them will show like excessive valgus. Like I've worked with some where their knees are practically touching down, and then up, and their heels are coming off the floor. That's a case where you definitely correct to where their heels can stay on the floor and they can maintain balance in the squat. Beyond that, yeah, I don't really correct it too much unless I feel like unless try a different position and then it turns out they're stronger in that position, then I just move them to a stronger position.
Yeah.
Honestly, it takes a lot of time to figure out like where they're stronger, where they're weaker. You can't make a snap judgment. So case dependent.
And one thing why even hesitant with the what's his name Caleb take is that I don't even know if there's significant strain on there is strain on the ACL, but I don't know if like people actually bust their ACL at the top of a squat.
Yeah, no.
Because with the histological studies I've shown, like there doesn't seem to be a clear case in situations where there's often an ACL tear.
Yeah,
I mean it's different. Like maybe if with like very high loads on a squat, it's different. Yeah, it's on two legs. Again, we don't know.
One leg. Yeah, and the forces are.
It might be that there's just
the ground reaction
maybe
forces
there's just
are
for
not the same. I think yeah.
Go ahead.
So I just think I don't think you can tear him with a squat, or it's going to be super rare.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I think one thing that you remember the sissy squat videos that have been going around of people like
I remember. It's not a sissy squat machine. I get mad at that. It's not a sissy squat, but I know what you mean.
Yeah. Do you think?
Yeah, that one's hard to explain. It probably popped before.
You think it popped before?
No, but I honestly don't get. I think it popped before when he was at the top, maybe, or it was already popped or something. Because if we look at like how it works, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Because like beyond 30 degrees, there's not a lot of stress on the ACL.
There's a new one of some woman tearing her ACL too. Yeah.
No, it wasn't. It popping her patella.
I don't know if it's an ACL tear. It's just some knee injury.
It was her patella. Pretty sure.
Okay.
The one I memed about. Yeah, it was her patella.
Yeah. So do you think those variations are dangerous at all?
I don't think so. I think the load management is the problem. Again, not for being familiar with that load, and even that person who said like the patella, the sissy squat machine, they were doing pretty well after. They were like, I wasn't used to that load. I just kind of maxed out of the blue on a machine I've never used. I was like, oh, this feels good. Let me add like 45 pounds to the machine I've never used and go like to a crazy range of motion. I don't think there's documented risk. Again, it's just go gradually. I see people use that machine all the time and they're fine. So I wouldn't be specifically worried about these machines. Sorry, I get the call. I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't know if I have anything to add regarding the Cal video. Yeah, I think maybe for squats, it's just you're splitting on two legs, you're going slowly. It might be that um, the ACL is time to adapt, like maintain homeostasis, because it's not a macro trauma. It might just be a micro trauma, that slight valgus in the knee.
Yeah,
I don't know, honestly, but
could
there
be.
could be some data because if you look at like elite powerlifters and people who have been lifting for a while, you go back to that Grizzlack study. Powerlifters have ACLs that are twice as thick as the average population. The effect on the hypertrophy of the ligament seems to happen mostly in people who started lifting really young, so before puberty, when you probably have like still stem cells in your knee. But you do see that people maintain that thickness despite lifting crazy loads and overloading. So it seems that at least that you're not like gradually shredding your ACL with lifting.
Mhm. So that's an
So
argument that
again,
we should be resistance training super young.
absolutely, and again,
Another
also
one.
that
Yeah.
that maybe the valgum. That's one of the reasons why you don't see that valgum in the squat, leading to a lot of like ACL tears. It's probably because, again, if you do it with recuperation, which usually resistance training, if you do it for a while, you're gonna get forced into doing it with good load management. Well, your ACL is time to kind of rebuild between sessions, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
All right.
Seedman, and then we're good.
Yeah, sure.
Let me send it. Do you have that one up, or do you want me to send it?
Send it to me on Instagram. I have the tab open.
Okay, I'll just send it.
Okay. Okay. Is he going to talk about 90 degrees again?
He's talking about range of motion.
Oh, interesting.
Substantiate this, and in fact, the science shows that 90-degree joint angles will not only optimize muscle function and injury prevention, but you'll actually handle those deep positions better than if you consistently train them. One of the biggest lies in the fitness industry is that in order to handle deep end range positions, you have to consistently train them. However, there's zero science to substantiate this, and in fact, the science shows that 90-degree joint angles will not only optimize muscle function and injury prevention, but you'll actually handle those deep positions better than if you consistently train them.
Yeah.
It's
I like-
kind of like where is that claim coming from? That's kind of my question.
Well, it's like, we have like, systematic reviews on this showing that if you train in a bigger range of motion, you're going to be stronger in that bigger range of motion compared to if you train in like a partial range. So I don't.
Yeah, you're talking about the Schoenfeld papers.
Yeah.
But he's talking about specifically about injury reduction.
Oh yeah, injury
He's,
reduction.
he's
I
right
mean,
that there's no data on this. It's not even data to substantiate that eccentric training is better at injury reduction. There's some theoretical data, which to me makes a lot of sense, and I think it's probably better because you're gaining range of motion and strength at the same time. So it's like a good combo.
mhm.
And a big limitation in injury reduction programs is how compliant people are. And J.P. Larson's systematic review, I think that one was from 2016 or 2017. They show that there's like a dose response. So the more the team does it, the less likely they are to get injured. So again, I think eccentrics serve a good purpose that way. But if we're talking about going into deep range of motion, improving hypertrophy and strength, yeah, we have data on this. The Kubo papers, the Schoenfeld papers, but do we have data showing that it reduces injuries more? Not really. I think he's surprisingly correct, but it doesn't mean his theory is more correct.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I mean, part of his claim was just like you can train in 90 degrees and you'll be stronger in a full range of motion. That's part of his claim too.
That's
so
not
it's
true.
like
The Kubo study shows the exact opposite.
Exactly. And then the other part of his claim, which is untested, is the injury reduction piece, like you said. I think it's kind of safe to assume that when most like fitness influencers make a claim about injury reduction, they're probably wrong. Because you just don't have, I'm serious, you just don't have good research on any of this.
Yeah, I mean it's okay, honestly. I think it gets I think Greg Lehman's too aggressive on the injury reduction literature. There's so much mechanisms, they all make sense, and there's this big claim, and again, even in Palliser he said the same thing. It's like, oh, it's not placebo controlled.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, but it's an objective outcome. Do you seriously think that giving someone a sugar pill is going to reduce ankle sprains? I know it's not very scientific of me, but for something very objective, I don't think it makes a huge difference.
Heck if I know, man. Depends what you tell him. What would you tell him if you gave him a sugar pill?
So for me, what you should compare to is either static stretching that it's light in nature.
Yeah.
Or you compare to strengthening another body part. That's my other design. If I do a PG, I'm probably going to do it this way. So you give soccer players upper body
That's cool.
training instead of lower body, and you look at lower body injuries. So what would be interesting is you can see you have a crossover design at the same time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. So you could see the effect of lower body training on upper body injuries.
But would their expectations be different?
For sure, but again, it's still a double randomized control trial because they're both the placebo for each other. I've never seen a study done like this. I find that really interesting, honestly.
No, that'd be cool. Yeah, I was just
doubling
asking,
the sample size.
Yeah, if you gave someone a sugar pill, what would you tell them?
This is going to reduce injuries. It improves recovery. It improves recovery of your tendons and joints, which makes it so that you don't get that gradual degradation of your tendons and muscles, making you less prone to injuries. There, bullshit line. Yeah. I would believe that if I were a 17-year-old.
Yeah, who knows? It could work, but also that could have a backfire effect where they think they're stronger and they push themselves harder now, and then they just get injured more.
Well, they would think that from the strengthening as well, so that's balanced at that level.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I mean, the strengthening though would kind of tire them out a little bit.
That's why again, minimal interventions do well.
Yeah.
Okay, so another thing they could control with, and that's something I would really be fine with for strengthening, would be using education alone. So landing, how to land, all this, do stuff like this. Because again, that's usually what we compare it in the real world. And what we want to see is the strengthening, is it going to reduce my injuries? Is really what we want to see. So yeah, I'm fine with it. Cool. But yeah. No claim, and again, one reason I think it's kind of stupid for Seaman to be making that claim is that not only is there no support for his theory either, so it's it doesn't mean that theory is wrong or unsupported, that yours, which is also unsupported, is true, because one of the main purported mechanisms for injury reduction is getting stronger, right? And going into a deep range of motion will make you stronger at more and more muscles, or stronger in general. There's more strain gain. Again, that. I don't know when the systematic review or meta-analysis from Schoenfeld is. I think it's last year, actually.
Yeah, I mean,
why would you be less prone to injuries by being weak? By being weaker, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, if you want to be more efficient, you kind of just, and you're doing squats, train the deeper range, because you're gonna get adductors and glutes a bit more than partial range
if you're able.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. I think that wraps it up, honestly. Do we have any closing words, or?
I'd just like to say that the CIA is still looking out for me. So for the time being, I am still anonymous. I know I've been getting a lot of questions about that, but.
Do you want to apologize to your victims?
No, not really. No.
You still don't regret it, eh? Okay, cool.
No.
All right. Peace out. You can find us at No Bullshit Physio on Instagram, and you can find Functional Memology at Functional Memology on Instagram as well. And I'm also on Twitter, and I think he is too. You're functional on Twitter, right?
Yeah, but I don't do anything on Twitter, so don't follow me there.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. All right. See you soon. All right. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Perfect.